A billionaire caught his black maid studying late at night. What he did next is shocking. Richard Langston's private jet touched down at 11:47 p.m., 3 hours earlier than scheduled. The Singapore deal had closed faster than anticipated, another billion added to his already considerable fortune. At 52, the self-made tech mogul had built Langston Tech from a garage startup into a global empire with tentacles in everything from quantum computing to sustainable energy. The financial press called him the Oracle of Silicon Valley. His employees called him demanding but fair. Very few people knew the real Richard Langston, the insomniac widower who wandered his empty mansion at night, pursued by memories and ideas that refused to let him rest. "I can have the driver take you home, sir," his personal assistant, Vanessa Reed, offered as they descended the jet stairs. The woman's perfectly manicured nails clicked against her tablet as she rescheduled tomorrow's meetings to accommodate his jet lag. "No need," Richard replied, loosening his tie. "I'll be up all night anyway. Might as well be productive." She nodded, used to his nocturnal habits. "The quarterly reports will be on your desk by morning. The acquisition paperwork needs your signature by noon." Richard barely heard her. His mind was already racing ahead to the next project, the next innovation. "Good night, Vanessa." The drive to his sprawling Atherton estate was quick at this hour. 27,000 square feet of modern architecture nestled among ancient redwoods, a glass and steel monument to his success that still didn't feel like home, even after 15 years. His wife Catherine had died before they moved in. Cancer. Aggressive and merciless. Sometimes he wondered if he'd built this palatial showcase just to fill the void she'd left behind. The security system disarmed with a soft chime as he entered through the side door. Unlike most billionaires, Richard kept minimal staff, a groundskeeper who came twice weekly, a part-time chef, and Amara, the live-in housekeeper who maintained the east wing where he actually lived. The rest of the house remained immaculate but untouched, like an elaborate stage set without actors. Exhaustion suddenly hit him like a physical weight. What he needed was tea, chamomile with a splash of honey, the way Catherine used to make it on nights when sleep evaded him. The kitchen was in the central portion of the house, and Richard rarely ventured there after hours. His private quarters had a smaller, more practical kitchenette, but he'd run out of honey last week and forgotten to add it to the shopping list. The mansion was silent as he padded through darkened hallways. He expected the kitchen to be dark as well. Amara would have retired to her quarters hours ago, but as he approached, he noticed light spilling from beneath the door. He pushed it open without thinking and stepped into unexpected tableau. The marble island in the center of the gourmet kitchen had been transformed into an impromptu study hall. Textbooks lay open in careful stacks. Yellow legal pads covered in neat handwriting. A laptop displaying a paused lecture video. And in the middle of it all, looking utterly stricken, sat Amara Jones. She jumped to her feet so quickly that her chair tipped backward, clattering against the tile floor. "Mr. Langston! I'm so sorry, sir. I thought you weren't due back until tomorrow afternoon." Richard had hired Amara 3 years ago. She was 32, with keen intelligence in her dark eyes and a quiet efficiency that he appreciated. Her resume had been impeccable, references from 2 other tech executives, a spotless background check, and an associate's degree in business administration. He realized now that he knew very little about her beyond her professional qualifications. "It's fine, Amara," he said, steadying the chair she'd knocked over. "You're allowed to use the kitchen. I'll clean this up right away, sir." Her hands moved swiftly, gathering papers with practiced precision. There was fear in her movements that bothered him, as though she expected punishment for being caught with books instead of cleaning supplies. "No need to rush," Richard said, moving toward the kettle. "I'm just making tea. Couldn't sleep." His casual tone seemed to confuse her more than anger would have. She hesitated, half-collected papers clutched to her chest. Richard glanced at the open textbook nearest him. "Business law?" he asked, scanning the chapter headings. "Are you studying for a degree?" Amara swallowed visibly. "Yes, sir. Online courses. I hope that's not a problem. I only study after my work is done and It's not a problem, he interrupted gently. I'm just curious. Something in his tone must have reassured her because she slowly set the papers down. I'm preparing for a scholarship opportunity, she admitted. The Hastings Foundation offers full rides to working professionals seeking to complete their education. The deadline was last month. Richard filled the kettle and set it on the stove. And? He prompted when she didn't continue. I never heard back. Her voice was carefully neutral, but disappointment shadowed her eyes. It's fine. There's always next year. But you're still studying. Richard nodded toward the books. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Can't stop now. I've got momentum. The kettle began to whistle, and Richard busied himself with preparing his tea. As he waited for it to steep, he studied Amara more carefully. The woman had worked in his home for 3 years, yet he realized he never really looked at her before. She wore simple black slacks and a navy sweater, practical clothes for late-night studying, not the uniform she wore during working hours. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, revealing high cheekbones and eyes that held both wariness and determination. What's your focus? He asked, gesturing toward her studies. Corporate law, she answered, seeming to relax slightly when she realized he wasn't upset. I was pre-law in college before. She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. Life had other plans. But I'm finding my way back to it. Richard nodded, surprising himself by asking, May I? As he gestured to one of her notebooks. After a moment's hesitation, she slid it toward him. The pages contained meticulous notes on contract law, with color-coded highlighting and careful annotations in the margins. He recognized concepts his own legal team had explained during acquisitions, considerations of equity, jurisdictional questions, force majeure clauses, all organized with remarkable clarity. These are excellent, he said, genuinely impressed. You have a mind for this. The compliment caught her off guard. Thank you, sir. Richard, he corrected automatically. It's 1 a.m. and we're discussing contract law. I think we can drop the formalities. This earned him a real smile, brief but transformative. For a moment, he glimpsed the person beneath the professional mask, someone with ambitions and dreams that extended far beyond maintaining his home. The Hastings Scholarship, he said, returning to their earlier topic. When exactly did you submit your application? 6 weeks ago. I gave it to Ms. Reed to include with the company's submissions. Langston Tech sponsors several applicants each year. She hesitated, then added, I thought having the company's endorsement might help my chances. Richard frowned. Something about this didn't sit right with him. He personally oversaw the scholarship committee at his company, part of his commitment to developing talent from unexpected places. He couldn't recall seeing Amara's name among the applicants. And you received no confirmation? No acknowledgement of receipt? She shook her head. Ms. Reed said she'd handle it. I assumed when I didn't hear anything that I simply wasn't selected. Richard sipped his tea, his mind whirring with possibilities, none of them pleasant. Vanessa Reed had been his executive assistant for 5 years. She was ruthlessly efficient, but also fiercely protective of access to him. Too protective, perhaps. I should let you get back to your tea, Amara said, misreading his silence. She began gathering her materials again. I'm sorry if I disturbed you. You didn't, Richard assured her. Actually, you've given me something to think about. As he watched her collect her books with the same care she showed everything in his home, Richard made a mental note to check the scholarship applications first thing tomorrow. A strange feeling settled in his chest, something between curiosity and indignation. He had built his fortune by recognizing potential where others saw nothing of value. And he had the distinct impression that someone in his organization had deliberately overlooked the potential standing right before him. Good night, Amara, he said, taking his tea. And good luck with your studies. Thank you. Richard, she replied, testing his name cautiously. As he walked back through the quiet house, Richard found himself more energized than he'd felt in months. Sleep would certainly elude him now, but for once, It wasn't mergers or acquisitions that occupied his thoughts. It was the image of a woman at his kitchen table at 1 in the morning, quietly building a bridge to a future someone else might have denied her. Sleep evaded Richard entirely that night. By 6 a.m., he was showered, dressed, and heading to Langston Tech headquarters, 2 hours before his usual arrival. The encounter with Amara had awakened something in him, a righteous indignation he hadn't felt since his early days fighting entrenched interests in Silicon Valley. The executive floor was empty save for the cleaning staff, who looked startled to see the CEO striding through at such an early hour. Richard nodded to them with newfound awareness. How many other Amaras worked within his empire, he wondered, their potential overlooked because of their uniforms or titles. He settled at his desk and pulled up the internal scholarship database. Langston Tech's education initiative was his personal passion project, offering employees at all levels opportunities for advancement. It had produced some of his best managers and engineers, people who understood the company from the ground up. Richard entered Amara's name in the search field. Nothing. He tried her employee ID number. Again, nothing. Frowning, he called HR directly. Jessica, I need to see all scholarship applications from the past 2 months, including those that didn't make the final review. Of course, Mr. Langston, the HR director replied, sounding surprised by the unusual request. Any particular reason? Just checking our process, he said vaguely. I want to see everything, even applications that were withdrawn or rejected at the preliminary stage. Within 30 minutes, Jessica had delivered a comprehensive spreadsheet. Richard scanned it quickly, and there it was, Amara Jones' application logged in the system on March 15th, but marked withdrawn by applicant on March 17th. That can't be right, he muttered. Amara clearly believed her application was still under consideration until recently. Richard's executive instincts kicked in. 25 years of business had taught him to trust patterns and documentation. He opened the company's security portal and requested footage from his outer office on March 15th through 17th. While waiting, he reviewed Amara's personnel file. Her background was even more impressive than he'd realized. She'd completed 3 years at UC Berkeley before withdrawing. Her references described her as exceptional and destined for greater things. The security footage arrived in his inbox. Richard skimmed through March 15th, and there was Amara, approaching Vanessa's desk with a large envelope. The exchange was brief. His assistant took the package with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Amara seemed to say something in earnest, pointing to the envelope. Vanessa nodded dismissively, already turning back to her computer. Richard continued through the footage. On March 17th, after hours when the office was empty, Vanessa opened the envelope, reviewed its contents with a scornful expression, and then deliberately moved it into the shredder beside her desk. She then turned to her computer, typing briefly, undoubtedly logging the application as withdrawn. Cold fury washed over Richard. He checked Vanessa's emails from that period, using his executive override. There it was, a message to Jessica in HR. Please mark A. Jones's scholarship application as withdrawn. She's reconsidered and doesn't wish to proceed. A complete fabrication. Richard leaned back in his chair, processing this betrayal. Vanessa had been with him for 5 years, trusted with sensitive information and access to his most important projects. Why would she sabotage a housekeeper's scholarship application? Then he remembered Vanessa's comments at a management retreat last year. We need to be selective about who represents Langston Tech publicly. Image matters in this industry. At the time, he'd interpreted it as concern for professional standards. Now he saw it differently. The intercom buzzed. Ms. Reed has arrived, sir, his receptionist announced. Send her in, Richard replied, closing the security footage but leaving Amara's file open on his desk. Vanessa entered with her usual efficiency, tablet in hand. Good morning, Mr. Langston. I've rescheduled your meetings to accommodate your early return. The Singapore contracts are ready for final review and... She stopped abruptly, noticing the personnel file on his desk. Her expression flickered briefly before resetting to professional neutrality. "Is there a problem with Amara?" she asked, her voice carefully modulated. "You tell me," Richard replied evenly. "You seem to have strong opinions about her future." Vanessa's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I think you do." Richard tapped his screen. "Why did you destroy her scholarship application, Vanessa?" The question hung in the air between them. Richard watched his assistant's face transition through shock, denial, and finally, calculations, as she assessed how much he knew. "I made a judgment call," she finally said, chin lifting slightly. "The Hastings Scholarship is prestigious. Recipients represent Langston Tech at industry events. I didn't think a housekeeper was appropriate for such visibility." The casual cruelty of the statement stunned him. "That wasn't your decision to make. With respect, sir, I make dozens of decisions daily about what reaches your desk. That's my job." Her tone suggested she'd done him a favor. Richard felt something fundamental shift in his perception of his company and his own leadership. How many other judgment calls had been made throughout his organization, closing doors that should have remained open? He picked up his phone and called security. "Mr. Langston?" Vanessa's composure finally cracked. "This conversation isn't over," Richard said quietly. "But it will continue tomorrow, with HR and legal present." After the executives departed, Richard found himself wandering through his cavernous home, mentally rehearsing what he would say to Amara. He found her in the East Wing kitchen, methodically preparing lunch as if it were any ordinary day. "Amara," he said gently from the doorway. "Could we talk?" She turned, her professional mask firmly in place, though her eyes betrayed a hint of redness. "Of course, Mr. Langston." "Richard," he corrected again. "And not here. Let's use the study." Moments later, they sat across from each other in his private sanctuary, a book-lined room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the redwood grove. It was the most personal space in the entire mansion, filled with mementos from his journey, Catherine's photograph, the circuit board from his first product, awards and artifacts from a life of innovation. "I believe you heard some of what happened this morning," he began, observing how she tensed slightly. "I did," she admitted. "I wasn't eavesdropping intentionally. I was bringing coffee to the kitchen and—" She straightened her shoulders. "I apologize for causing disruption in your company." "You have nothing to apologize for," Richard replied firmly. "Nothing whatsoever. It's I who should apologize to you. This happened under my watch, in my organization." Silence stretched between them, employer and employee, billionaire and housekeeper, yet in this moment, simply two humans navigating an unexpected connection. "Why didn't you tell me you attended Berkeley?" he finally asked. Amara's hands twisted together briefly before she stilled them. "It wasn't relevant to cleaning your home properly." The simple statement hit Richard like a physical blow. How many people moved through the world with their capabilities hidden because society had decided those capabilities weren't relevant to the roles assigned to them? "Tell me about Berkeley," he said. "What happened?" Something in his tone must have conveyed genuine interest because Amara's defensive posture softened slightly. "I was pre-law scholarship student. First in my family to attend college." Pride flickered across her face. "Junior year, my mother was diagnosed with aggressive multiple sclerosis. I was her only family, so I withdrew to care for her." "I'm sorry," Richard said, thinking of his own loss, how Catherine's illness had altered the trajectory of his life. "We managed for 5 years. I took online courses when I could, worked whatever jobs fit around her care schedule." Amara's voice remained steady, matter-of-fact. "After she passed, I needed stability, good health insurance. Your staff agency had this position. And you've been here 3 years." Richard nodded, mentally calculating. "All while continuing your education in whatever scraps of time you could find." "Yes." A simple answer containing years of persistence. Richard leaned forward. "Amara, the scholarship you applied for, it would have covered tuition, but little else. Even if Vanessa hadn't interfered, it would have been nearly impossible for you to work full-time while completing a law degree. I would have found a way, she said with quiet certainty. I believe you would. Richard smiled slightly. But I'm offering something different. He stood, walking to his desk to retrieve a folder he'd prepared earlier. I've drawn up a proposal. Langston Tech will fully fund your education, tuition, books, living expenses, while providing you a part-time position as my personal research assistant. 20 hours a week, flexible scheduling around your classes. Amara stared at him, stunned. Mr. Langston. Richard, this is too much. It's not charity, he said firmly. I've reviewed your academic records. You're brilliant, Amara. And there's more. He handed her the folder. I'm offering personal mentorship. You'll shadow me at key meetings and negotiations. See how business law works in practice, not just theory. Amara's hands trembled slightly as she opened the folder, scanning the document within. I don't understand why you would do this. Richard considered his answer carefully. 25 years ago, I was a nobody with big ideas and no connections. Catherine's father, my father-in-law, saw something in me that others missed. He gave me my first real opportunity. He gestured around them. Everything I've built came from that initial belief. He paused, remembering the gruff venture capitalist who'd taken a chance on a scruffy engineer when more polished entrepreneurs were being shown the door. You know what he told me? Talent is universal. Opportunity isn't. I've tried to live by that, but clearly I've failed in some ways. Richard's voice grew serious. What happened with your application reveals a bigger problem. While I'm fixing that systematically, I can also address it personally, by ensuring at least one deserving person isn't left behind. Amara stared at the document, then back at Richard. What if I fail? Then you fail. He shrugged. But you won't. She sat silently, emotions playing across her face, hope warring with caution, ambition with practicality. There's one condition, Richard added. What's that? She asked, wariness returning to her voice. You have to quit being my housekeeper, he said with a small smile. I can't have my protégé cleaning my bathrooms. It would be awkward. The callback to Vanessa's earlier prejudice made Amara laugh unexpectedly, a bright, genuine sound that transformed her face. I accept, she said, extending her hand formally. Thank you for this opportunity. I won't let you down. As they shook hands, Richard felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the pure satisfaction of connecting potential with possibility. He'd made billions creating technology, but in this moment, he was investing in something far more valuable, human potential that might otherwise have been lost. 6 weeks later, Amara stood outside Langston Tech's imposing headquarters, her reflection barely recognizable in the mirrored glass facade. Gone was the maid's uniform, replaced by a tailored navy suit and subtle pearl earrings, gifts from Richard's personal stylist, who'd been tasked with creating her professional wardrobe. Her hair, formerly always pulled back in a practical bun, now framed her face in soft, confident layers. Taking a deep breath, she swiped her new access badge. Amara Jones, Executive Research Associate, and entered the building. The transformation had been swift and comprehensive. Within days of their conversation, Richard had established the Catherine Langston Scholars Program, named after his late wife who had been a passionate educator before her illness. Amara was announced as the inaugural recipient, the pilot case for what would become Langston Tech's most ambitious education initiative. She now occupied a small but elegant office near Richard's, attended Stanford Law part-time, and spent 20 hours weekly shadowing the billionaire through the intricate workings of his empire. The arrangement raised eyebrows initially, particularly among executives who remembered her serving coffee at the mansion, but Richard's unwavering support made it clear that any criticism would be unwelcome. "Morning, Amara," called Jessica from HR, passing in the hallway. The same woman who'd sat stunned during Vanessa's termination now greeted her warmly. "Ready for the Nakamura negotiations?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Amara replied with a smile that concealed her nerves. Today marked her first major test. Richard had asked her to review the proposed contract for a Japanese semiconductor acquisition and to attend the negotiation as an observer. She'd spent the weekend annotating the document, identifying potential issues that even the legal team had missed. When she reached the executive floor, she found Richard waiting by the conference room, reviewing notes on his tablet. "Perfect timing," he nodded approvingly. "Our guests arrive in 20 minutes. Any final thoughts on the contract?" "Section 4.7 could be problematic," Amara replied without hesitation. "The force majeure clause is overly broad. In Japanese contract law, that could create an easy exit path if market conditions change." Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. "You research Japanese contract law? I thought it might be relevant," she said simply. He smiled, a glint of pride in his eyes. "Excellent instinct. Let's see if they try to leverage it." The negotiation proved illuminating, not just for Amara but for the entire executive team. The Japanese delegation was formidable, 7 stern-faced men in identical dark suits, accompanied by 2 translators. They betrayed no reaction to Amara's presence, though she noticed their chief counsel watching her with growing curiosity as the meeting progressed. 3 hours in, the discussion turned to contingency clauses. Just as Amara had predicted, the Japanese lawyer highlighted Section 4.7, suggesting a minor linguistic adjustment that would have significantly altered the terms. Richard glanced at Amara, then nodded slightly. Taking her cue, she cleared her throat. With respect, she addressed the Japanese team directly. The proposed modification would effectively transform this from a binding agreement to an optional one under Shoujo Commercial Code. While we understand your desire for flexibility, perhaps we could instead add specificity to the existing clause rather than broadening it? The room fell silent. The Japanese counsel stared at her, then broke into a surprised smile. "You are familiar with Japanese commercial law?" he asked, switching from his translator to accented but fluent English. "Only superficially," Amara admitted. "But enough to recognize the implications." The tension in the room dissolved as the Japanese team conferred briefly, then offered a compromise that protected both parties' interests. By day's end, the contract was signed, with Amara's revision intact. As the delegation departed, Richard's COO Diane pulled him aside. "That was impressive," she murmured, watching Amara speaking with the legal team. "Where did you find her again?" "Cleaning my house," Richard replied mildly, enjoying Diane's startled expression. "Imagine where she might be now if Vanessa had her way." The incident became something of a legend within the company, the former housekeeper who outmaneuvered a Japanese negotiation team. It silenced the remaining skeptics and accelerated Amara's acceptance into Langston Tekka's executive culture. But the true transformation occurred beyond the boardroom. Richard watched Amara growing more confident daily, her natural intelligence flourishing with proper nurturing, her perspective bringing fresh insights to entrenched problems. She approached business challenges with a practical wisdom born from years of managing life's hardships on limited resources. The Catherine Langston Scholars Program, meanwhile, expanded rapidly. Richard overhauled the selection process, creating a blind review system that evaluated applications without names, job titles, or demographics visible. By the 3rd month, 5 more employees from overlooked corners of the company had joined the program: a maintenance engineer, an administrative assistant, a campus shuttle driver. One evening, as Richard and Amara worked late reviewing acquisition targets, he noticed her staring thoughtfully out the window at the San Francisco skyline. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. "I was thinking about my mother," she replied quietly. "She cleaned houses her entire life so I could have a chance at education. When I had to leave school to care for her, she was heartbroken, more for me than herself." Richard waited, sensing there was more. "She used to tell me, doors close, windows open. At the time, it felt like empty comfort." Amara turned to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I never imagined the window would be this big." Richard, normally restrained with emotions, reached out and briefly squeezed her hand. "She would be proud of you." "I know," Amara nodded. "But I'm not finished yet." Indeed, she wasn't. The following week, she identified a critical flaw in a pending contract that saved the company millions, proving definitively that Richard's investment in her potential was paying dividends far beyond what anyone could have predicted. 1 year later, the grand ballroom of the San Francisco Palace Hotel buzzed with anticipation. Langston Tech's annual summit had always been an exclusive gathering of industry leaders, investors, and top-tier employees, a celebration of innovation and achievement. But this year was different. Behind the stage, Amara adjusted her crimson blazer, pulse racing as she reviewed her notes, one final time. Through the curtain, she could see nearly 1,000 attendees taking their seats, executives in bespoke suits mingling with employees from every level of the company, including the newest cohort of Catherine Langston scholars in their distinctive blue lapel pins. Nervous? Richard appeared beside her, immaculate in his trademark charcoal suit. Terrified, she admitted with a small laugh. Public speaking wasn't covered in law school. Just tell your story, he advised. The rest will follow. The lights dimmed, and Richard stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause. For 15 minutes, he outlined Langston Tech's remarkable year: breakthrough technologies, record profits, expanded global reach. Then his tone shifted. But our most important achievement can't be measured in stock prices or market share, he said, voice softening. True innovation isn't just about technology, it's about recognizing human potential where others see only job titles. He gestured toward the side of the stage. I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, someone whose journey embodies the change we're striving to create. 1 year ago, she was cleaning my kitchen floors. Today, she's completing her law degree with honors, has saved this company millions with her legal insights, and serves as architect of our most transformative internal initiative. A murmur rippled through the audience. Please welcome Amara Jones, Executive Director of the Catherine Langston Scholars Program. The applause as Amara walked onto the stage was tentative at first, then swelled as Richard stepped aside, ceding the spotlight completely to her. For a moment, she stood silently at the podium, taking in the sea of faces, some curious, some skeptical, many supportive. Thank you, Richard, she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. And thank you all for the welcome. I recognize it's unusual to have someone like me addressing you today. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Actually, let me rephrase that. It's unusual to have someone with my particular journey standing here. But people like me, people with potential, ambition, and capability, we're everywhere. Working in your mailrooms. Serving your lunches. Cleaning your offices after hours. The audience grew completely still, hanging on her words. My mother cleaned houses for 40 years. Amara continued. She had one of the sharpest minds I've ever known, but never had the chance to develop it formally. When I was forced to leave college to care for her during her illness, I thought my dreams were over too. For years, I worked whatever jobs I could find, including as Mr. Langston's housekeeper. She smiled slightly. I was grateful for that position. It provided stability, benefits, dignity. But I never stopped studying, never stopped believing I could return to my original path. Amara glanced at Richard, who nodded encouragingly. One night, Mr. Langston caught me studying business law in his kitchen at 1 a.m. That chance encounter revealed something broken in the system, a qualified applicant whose scholarship application had been deliberately discarded because of assumptions about who belongs in which roles. Several executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But that's not why I'm here today, Amara continued. I'm here because of what happened next. Instead of simply fixing one instance of injustice, Richard Langston asked a bigger question: how many others? How many talents are we overlooking because we can't see past uniforms and job descriptions? She gestured to a table near the front where 7 people sat wearing blue lapel pins, the current Catherine Langston scholars. In 1 year, the program has identified 17 employees with extraordinary potential. Maria Rodriguez was a janitor with an uncompleted engineering degree. She now leads our sustainability team. James Chin drove our shuttle bus while coding at night. He's now developing our next-generation security protocol. Devin Williams prepared food in our cafeteria while writing economic analyses in his spare time. He just completed our Asian market expansion strategy. The audience broke into spontaneous applause. This isn't charity, Amara emphasized as the room quieted. It's smart business. Talent exists at every level of your organization. The question is whether you have systems to recognize and develop it, or barriers that suppress it. She closed her leather portfolio and looked directly at the crowd. 1 year ago, I stood in Richard Langston's study, convinced his offer was too good to be true. He told me something I'll never forget. He said, talent is universal. Opportunity isn't. Today, I'm asking all of you to carry that message back to your teams, your departments, your companies. Look deeper. See potential where others see only positions. As Amara concluded to a standing ovation, Richard watched from the wings, a rare sense of fulfillment washing over him. He had built an empire from silicon and algorithms, but this was a different kind of legacy. A human one. After the summit, at a small private reception for the scholars, Amara approached him with 2 flutes of champagne. Congratulations, he said, accepting one. You've become quite the inspirational figure. I had a good teacher, she replied, clinking her glass against his. Though I'm still getting used to people asking for my autograph instead of asking me to make their beds. They both laughed, the shared joke bridging their vastly different starting points. What's next for you? Richard asked. Law degrees almost finished. Scholarship programs thriving. Corner office in your future, perhaps? Amara smiled enigmatically. Actually, I've been thinking about something else. There are people like my mother in every community, brilliant minds with no pathway forward. I want to scale what you did for me. A foundation? Richard suggested. Something like that. She nodded. But I'll need a partner with resources and influence. Consider it done, he replied without hesitation. Whatever you need. As they watched the scholars mingling with executives, former shuttle drivers and cafeteria workers now engaged in animated discussions about technology and business strategy, both recognized the beautiful symmetry of the moment. What had begun with a chance midnight encounter had catalyzed transformation far beyond one woman's career. The ripples would continue outward, touching lives neither of them would ever meet, all because one man had paused to truly see the person behind the uniform, and one woman had refused to abandon her dreams.